Comparative anatomy between a snail and a frog. Introduction. In this presentation, you will see the differences and similarities between snail and frog, and also diving into their backgrounds and life habits. Animal background: frog. Their kingdom is Animalia, phylum Chordate, class Amphibia, order Anura, family Rhinidae, genus Rana, and species Foruna. The background of a frog starts off with a frog hatching from an egg into gilled water-dwelling, a larval stage called a tadpole, and after they form into adults and become frogs. The ecological habitat, biotic and abiotic frog. The ecological habitat of rhinophoruri is freshwater habitats because their reproduction is aquatic. They like to be in freshwater because it keeps their skin moist, which is why they live in ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, or creeks. Biotic factors are them living amongst plants and anything living around them. Abiotic factors include living amongst rocks and things that are non-living. Other abiotic factors include pH levels of water, sunlight, temperature of the water, and precipitation levels in the habitat. Biotic factors are algae, which help to make energy because they are autotrophs and allow for energy to be transferred between organisms in these certain communities. Other biotic factors will be animals that prey on frogs, like snakes, as well as animals that frogs prey on, like insects. How the frog fits into the food chain web of ecosystem. Food chain is defined as ecology as a sequence of transfers of matter and energy in the form of food from organisms to organism. Frogs eat a lot of insects, which help balance the food chain. Since they feed on small animals and insects, it regulates overpopulation. Biotic factors such as algae, which are autotrophs, create food through sunlight and allow frogs to gain energy from other organisms. Also, frogs provide energy for organisms that they prey on, like fish, birds, and snakes. Mating patterns and behavior of a frog. Mating for frogs can go on for several hours, days, or even months. Some behavior of a frog is sometimes that they like to stay in large groups. For frogs, the male frog clasps the female underneath an embrace, which is called amplexus. During mating season, the male frog in a group will croak loudly so the female can hear, and frogs attract them by croaking. When the female finds a male she likes, the male will grab her and she will release her eggs to fertilize. Mating in frogs typically involves the male wrapping his arms around the female depositing eggs, and the male fertilizing the eggs. The prediction of what may have caused the frog to evolve different features at the point of the last common ancestor is frogs have evolved due to being related to lizards, which then are closely related to apes on the Phylogenetic Tree, giving frogs the ability to do more things.
The kingdom is Animalia, phylum Muscula, class Gastropoda, order Stylomotropha, family Helisae, genus Helix, species Aspera. The ecological habitat are backyards of houses, vegetation, on trees, on shrubs, in sheds, forests, riverbanks, swamps, cities, jungles.
Snails have many predators, which are mostly small vertebrates, invertebrates, birds, and mammals. For instance, squirrels, toads, lizards, flies, centipedes, and more. What these predators do in order to eat or kill a snail is to either crush it or make a hole in the shell in order to reach the organ/meat. Snails consume leaves, stems, plant crops, bark, and fruits. Snails, seen as helpless as they are, actually have defense mechanisms like creating more mucus, retracting into their shell, and living under rocks and plants, and more. Even though they have both reproductive organs, snails can reproduce asexually as well as sexually. Snails are sexually mature within the first or second year of life and usually occur during summer. The mating process takes about 4 to 12 hours.
Due to being hermaphrodites, snails had a smooth start of adapting due to moving around in different types of areas. Their features evolved through adaptation.
Okay, so for the digestive system of a frog's digestive system starts with its mouth. They have a highly specialized tongue which allows them to catch prey. Food from the mouth then goes to the stomach by going down the esophagus. Once it reaches the stomach, it goes into the small intestine made up of the duodenum and the ileum. Majority of digestion and absorption occur in the small intestine. The liver and pancreas are attached to the digestive system via ducts and play important roles in digestion. The liver plays several critical roles such as metabolism, detoxification, glycogen storage, as well as blood protein synthesis. Frogs also have a gallbladder which stores bile from the liver. The pancreas is attached to the duodenum and is in charge of secreting digestive enzymes. After the small intestines, frogs have a large intestine which mainly functions in reabsorption of salts and water. And the large intestine is quite small in a frog and mainly consists of the rectum, which is the end of the digestive system. And on the pictures, that big blue part on the left for the frog, that's the liver. And then up top right here, this is the stomach. And then as you can see here, this is the small intestine. And yeah.
For snails, they intake their food through their mouth. Then the snail takes their food and brings it through the radula. When the snail's food goes through the radula, it tears and grinds the food up into a bunch of pieces. The snail's jaw holds the food in place. While this process is happening, after the food is ground, it goes through the esophagus and is transported to the crop and stomach, where the food is digested. The crop and stomach use their digestive glands to make the food more liquid-like. After the stomach, the food goes through the intestine. In the intestine, the food nutrients are absorbed, and the indigestible parts of the snail's food is opened to the anus by the respiratory opening in the mantle fold.
For the excretory and reproductive system for a frog, the excretory system contains of mainly the kidneys. The kidneys function by removing waste from blood, especially nitrogenous waste in the form of urea. Reabsorption of water and salts, just like in the large intestine, also occurs in the kidneys, as well as disposing liquid waste in the form of urine. A pair of ureters conveys the urine up to the urinary bladder, and both liquid and solid waste leave the frog by the cloaca and the cloacal vent. The mesentery, which is made of connected tissue, holds all these organs together in the excretory system. The male reproductive system contains the testes, sperm ducts, and the cloaca. Sperm pass through the testes via fine ducts called vasa efferentia, and through the kidneys to the left and right ureters, and then to the cloaca. And then the female reproductive system contains ovaries, oviducts, uteri, and cloaca. The ovaries produce eggs, which move through oviducts into the uteri, and then through the cloaca outside the body. In the spring prior to egg laying, ovaries are greatly distended and fill a large portion of the body cavity. And black and white spherical eggs will be clearly visible in the frogs, like on the left side of the screen. And after egg laying till the fall, the ovaries are much smaller and appear as a pair of irregular shaped lacy structures attached to the kidneys in a similar position to the testes in males.
For snails, excretion occurs in a kidney whose interior surface has been increased by many interior walls called septae. Through their walls, filtration of blood flowing through takes place. Terrestrial snails usually excrete urea containing almost no water. When it comes to the reproductive system, snails are very unique. Snails are hermaphrodites, meaning they have both eggs and sperm in their body. So the sperm fertilizes the egg in the same snail. That doesn't seem to occur often though. Usually the sperm cells in the snail are already grown while the eggs are still young, so the sperm cells fertilize eggs in the other snails.
The respiratory system in frogs occurs through the skin and in the lungs. The skin is very rich in blood vessels, and oxygen can pass through the membranous skin, entering directly into the blood. When a frog is underwater, all its respiration takes place through the skin. And tadpoles, which are aquatic, have gills as well. But during metamorphosis, they are replaced by simple lungs in a frog. And air can enter the body through nostrils, and they pass through the windpipe and is received by the lungs. A frog may breathe by simply opening its mouth and letting air flow into the windpipe. However, it may also breathe with its mouth closed. And the lungs aren't visible in this picture, but they are under the liver right here. And they'll be like on this left side right here.
As for the snails, only have one lung, which is in their mantle cavity, and they have gills situated in their palaeal cavity, which aid in their breathing, as well as pulmonate snails have their gill located in front of their heart. Their lung has blood vessels on its roof in order to supply the lung with the oxygen they need, and as it expands, they allow air to come in and limit the loss of water too.
And for the circulatory system of a frog, it includes the heart, veins, and arteries. The heart is protected with a pericardium, and the frog's heart has two upper chambers, the right and left atrium, and only one lower chamber, the ventricle. Blood is carried to the heart through the veins and from the lungs. Then blood goes to the ventricle and finally pumped to the arteries that carry blood away from the heart. This means that oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood containing waste gases and products are in the frog ventricle at all times. However, the oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor bloods do not mix. In addition, the spleen functions in the destruction of old red blood cells and removal of other debris from the bloodstream.
Snails have an open circulatory system, meaning that snails may have some important blood cells, such as the pulmonary vein leading to the lung of the heart and the main artery or aorta, but the blood circulates freely between the organs. A heart of a snail has two chambers, which includes one ventricle and one atrium.
The nervous system in a frog, just like all vertebrates, frogs have a skeleton moved by striated muscles. Internal organs only contain smooth muscle tissue, and frogs use nerves to transfer signals through the spinal cord to muscles. Frogs differ from snails because snails are not vertebrates and do not contain a spinal cord. Frogs also have very different locomotion as they move with their legs, which snails do not have. Frogs use their legs for locomotion by sending signals to their brain to motor neurons, which help control muscle activity in the frog's body.
For the snail, it has the cerebral ganglia, gives off the nerve signals to the eyes, tentacles, and other parts of its head. But with the pedal ganglia, sends off signals to the foot of the snails. Where it allows the snail to retract their eyes when something touches it, but it also tells the snail when to go into their shell when danger and uses it as protection from the predators.
Shared structures of a frog and snail include digestive gland, lung, heart, and reproductive organs, liver, eyes. Both of them have similar skin textures given that they are both moist and slimy. A snail has a shell, however a frog does not. The way a snail moves is very slow and drags along a trail of slime, but frogs move and jump around. Snails are hermaphrodites, which means they have both female and male parts. Frogs tend to be either male or female and reproduce with each other, meaning that snails are asexual.
Okay, in the phylogenetic tree, the most common recent ancestor would be Annelida, And in conclusion, there are many different things to distinguish each animal and place them in a group. However, there are also similarities you can spot within their organ systems. These two organisms share organ structures like the heart, lungs, stomach, and kidneys, which allow them to live in their respective